And in exchange, Israel releasing some 369 Palestinian prisoners. The first ones on buses that left Ofer prison earlier have since arrived in the West Bank city of Ramallah. A jubilant crowd welcoming them. Of the 369, 29 from the West Bank, 7 from Jerusalem and its suburbs, 24 who will be deported. The Palestinians being released this Saturday include some detainees that were convicted of deadly attacks on Israelis. Most, though, arrested during the war and held without trial or charge. 4 freed prisoners have been transferred to a West Bank hospital. That information coming from the Red Crescent. For more on this exchange, we can speak now to Eberhard Kienle, a research professor at CNRS and Sciences Po University here in Paris. Hello to you, Eberhard. How important was it to have a smooth handover after what we saw last Saturday?
It was certainly important, but there are far more important matters, one of them, of course, being what will happen next, whether the Prime Minister or his office will be proven right, whether we will move on to the second stage.
And proven right in what context?
Well, I mean, proven right in the sense whether Israel wants the release of all hostages now, today, or whether Israel will be happy with the release of the 3 of them so far. So this is, of course, an issue to be debated, an issue to be seen. And then, of course, we have to see what will happen to stage 2, which is late. The negotiations are starting late. And then, of course, most important, stage 3. And all of this, of course, depends in one way or another on the interpretation that the ones and the others, Hamas especially, and the Israeli government, on the other hand, the interpretation they have of Mr. Trump's declarations about the future of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, at the moment, I think, if my math is correct, 73 hostages remain in Gaza.
Roughly, yes.
Yeah, and at Hostage Square today in Tel Aviv, family members whose loved ones are still being held captive. They're going to be fasting for 500 minutes and holding another rally. Monday will mark 500 days of captivity. Some of these people accusing the Israeli government of delays for political gain. How do you see that?
Again, this is a matter of appreciation, but It seems to me that if you look at what happened since the 7th of October, the hostages were never quite a priority on the mind of the Israeli government.
Priority to quote unquote exterminate Hamas.
Was another one, and that was, of course, to wage that war for the various reasons that we have talked about in the past, because Mr. Netanyahu is in trouble with the judiciary, because his coalition has always been weak, is even been weak and frail today, because many in these coalition, and he himself to an extent as well, it's not only his coalition partners or former coalition partners, but also he himself, are rather on the side of war and rather on the side of finishing, as he might say, the job in Trumpian language in Gaza, than to actually work towards the release of the hostages. It seems to me that right from the beginning, the idea, which lots of people didn't share at the moment, that one could bring back the hostages through war was pretty illusionary.
Yeah,
it's a contradiction in itself.
Yep, and you mentioned Donald Trump's role in all of this. Obviously, a disruptive force. He's made some shocking comments about what to do with Gaza, but he's also been pushing some of the Arab nations to come up with solutions. Do you think that can lead to anything that would be acceptable on both sides of the conflict?
It's all very difficult to say. I suppose for the moment, it depends on how we assess Mr. Trump or Trumpism. We can think that it's only a negotiating position. We can think that he wants to push others to move, possibly, but we can also think that he actually, thinks that's what should happen, that indeed Gaza should become sort of a territory under American whatever, overlordship. We don't quite know. He's not quite sure about that himself, I suppose. On the other hand, of course, we have seen or heard recently Marco Rubio say that there might be some leeway for an Arab plan if the Arab plan was better. So I suppose it's all being debated, but certainly so far this has been a threat so far it is a threat to the negotiations for stage 2, even for the end of stage 1, and for the negotiations of stage 2 towards stage 3. So for the moment, it's a threat. We will see how this will work out. Today, I suppose everybody sort of remained more or less constructive. So I suppose this can go on, but there is a threat hovering over the entire process as long as the Americans do not clarify what they actually mean.
Yeah, and for our viewers, can you spell out what phase 2 and phase 3 of the ceasefire agreement should or would include?
Well, I mean, according to the initial agreement, we are now in stage 1, which is the release of a certain number of Israeli hostages and a larger number of Palestinian prisoners. Lots of people think about the relationship, the ratio, but of course there are many more people in Israeli prisons than there are hostages. So it would also be the partial withdrawal of the Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip. Stage 2 would be the release of all other prisoners and the complete withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. And stage 3 would be thinking about and hopefully working towards reconstruction of the Gaza Strip.
And how do you think, I know you don't have any direct role here, but how do you think we get both parties to agree on that phase 2, phase 3? Everyone's wondering about that now because phase 1 should be wrapping up next month.
I suppose it will be very difficult if we think about the two sides directly involved, which is Hamas and its allies and the Israeli government on the other hand. Of course, there is a third actor, which is the United States. Now, we do not know quite how far the United States government will go and what it actually thinks at this particular stage. So we may think, again, it's a negotiating position. We may think they are serious about the Trump plan. We don't know. What we have seen is that the Americans, Mr. Trump himself, put some pressure on Netanyahu at the very beginning to reach this particular agreement. Now, we may conclude from that Mr. Trump will ultimately be happy to put a little bit more pressure on the Israeli side, although this is contradicted by his ideas about the Riviera so it's really open. It's up in the air, I think. We will have to see how he and probably whom he consults in and around the White House in the next couple of days.
Yeah, so a lot of uncertainty moving forward. As you say, Donald Trump, a notoriously difficult man to predict. Some in the administration might not even know what his...
It might get easier as we go along. I mean, we will certainly be better used to his ways, but I suppose for the moment it's very difficult to see how things will unfold in the near future and in the broader future.
Right. Eberhard, thank you very much for your time. Eberhard Kienle, a Middle East specialist and a research professor at CNRS and Sciences Po University. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.